So my project is on adolescent viewpoints on authority. So the topic falls under social psychology, and it is adolescent responses to authority, and more specifically, adolescent opinions on authority in an academic setting. So authority is essentially a social relationship where one person commands or serves as an influence for another person's behaviors. And authority requires mutual reinforcement, whereas the commander needs reinforcement from the follower, as in they listen and respond correctly to the commands, and vice versa. And adolescence is a period of life in which a child develops into an adult. So these samples come from the same study, and this study covers both weird and non-weird samples. Our weird sample in this study are from students, and the study says they are from tertiary and senior secondary levels of education, which roughly translates to secondary and post-secondary, so high school and college level. They are from European countries, and the European countries are Finland, Germany, and Spain. Our non-weird samples are students from the same age/education range. They're from East Asian countries, and they're from Brunei, mainland China, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And these numbers next to the names of the countries are just how many people are from that country. So the method. Each student is given 3 statements to respond to regarding teacher authority, and they can respond using a range of strongly disagree to neutral to strongly agree, with disagree and agree being in between there. And each response is given corresponding points. So strongly disagree gets 1 point, strongly agree gets 5 points, and so on and so forth. The average response score is then calculated for each country, and then the average for each group, weird and non-weird, is calculated from the averages of the countries that fall under those categories. So the statements that the students were responding to were as follows. In the classroom, I see the teacher as somebody whose authority should not be questioned. I see knowledge as something that the teacher should pass on to me rather than something I should discover myself, and I expect the teacher, rather than me myself, to be responsible for evaluating how much I have learned. So for the first statement, this is regarding questioning authority. The weird average was 2.53 and the non-weird was 2.46. So the weird leaned more disagree to neutral, whereas non-weird leaned more disagree. For the second statement, which is wondering if knowledge should be passed down from a teacher or if it should be something that should be discovered on your own, the weird averaged 2.13 and the non-weird 2.51. So the weird average strongly disagreed to disagree, whereas non-weird average disagreed to neutral. And for statement number 3, which questions whether or not the teacher should be responsible for evaluating how much a student has learned, weird averaged 2.72, whereas non-weird averaged 3.11. And so weird average disagreed to neutral and non-weird averaged neutral. So in conclusion, both European and East Asian students seem to answer very similarly to these statements. They all answered from strongly disagree to neutral. There were no agree or strongly agrees to any of the 3 statements. Asian students seem to disagree more on the statement that authority should not be questioned, therefore they think that authority should be questioned. European students disagreed more on the statement that knowledge should be passed down and not discovered, so therefore they think it is better for a student to discover knowledge on their own. And both groups leaned more neutral on the statement that teachers should be the one to assess learning progress instead of the student. So comparing the weird and the non-weird samples in this study. For this study and these samples specifically, the results seem fairly consistent among weird and non-weird samples, but there are some things to consider. First of all, this study is older. It was published in January of 2000, so it may be outdated or disproven in replication. The study has more non-weird than weird participants, so that may skew the data. And the study shows how students would prefer to think of teacher authority rather than how they actually respond. So responses may be different between weird and non-weird. Continuing that, there are stereotypes. There is a very strong and very prominent stereotype that Asian students easily and happily defer to authority. This stereotype may create and or add societal pressure to these students, making them defer to authority. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And continuing with the societal pressure, it can be born from stereotypes, but there also is cultural pressure. There may be a cultural pressure for non-weird students to not outwardly question authority, especially in academic settings. So this really is a difference between actions versus feelings. There may be similar feelings towards authority between weird and non-weird samples, but there may be very different responses, like physical manifestations of these feelings in weird versus non-weird. Students in weird countries may be more likely to actually speak out for what they feel versus non-weird countries.